So about my topic this afternoon, the organizers of the conference approached me about my background as an author, editor, and publisher, as well as my administrative roles at the Society of Biblical Literature and now for ATLA. As a scholar of the Old Testament, I spent 30 years in academic religion and theology publishing, and then leading organizations that serve biblical scholars and theologians, and now theological librarians. For 20 years, I taught a publishing and writing workshop for African American doctoral students in religion and theology to help them turn their ideas into their first book, in some cases for scholars and in other cases for a wider audience. The conference organizer suggested I address the assembly on this topic, sound doctrine and theological education, as it relates to publishing, noting that many African theological educators, like you, are current and or aspiring authors and want to learn more about the process of getting a book published for a wider audience. For example, what publishers are looking for, particularly from international authors. So with that in mind, I'm combining all of my experiences in this talk, and I'm drawing from my experiences to focus on practice, not theory. My advice today is meant to be practical, even personal. At its core, for me, publishing is about two things: passion and relationships. Passion, because you write about things you deeply care about. And relationships, because you form two. Two types of relationships. One is with the publisher, and the other is with the reader. In the case of the reader, most of them you'll never meet, unlike your students in a classroom. So the responsibility and the challenges are even greater. Especially in this context, you become a source of sound doctrine, not just a writer about sound doctrine. You preserve and transmit sound doctrine to readers. Lastly, I hope these slides will stimulate conversation. I'm leaving time for questions and discussion. I'm available here and after this conference, whenever, wherever you have questions. Feel free to contact me through email or my WhatsApp QR code listed here. Please consider me a continuing resource for you now and in the future. So while I'm focusing on publishing and publications that serve sound doctrine in theological education, I want to set this topic in a wider context to emphasize, one, your increased need to discern sound sources for sound doctrine in an age of misinformation and disinformation, and two, why you need to support and collaborate with librarians for your writing and teaching. The reason this larger context is important is because as an author and an educator, you don't exist in a vacuum. You need resources, and these are both material, the library, and personal, human, the librarian. You want them both to be trustworthy. Of course, I do represent ATLA, Theological Library Association, but you are also a kind of captive audience. So Eric, if you could lock the door so no one can leave. But really, my topic affords me the opportunity, the chance to talk about the role of librarians for you as writers. Information literacy is the ability to find, evaluate, understand, and use information. It includes skills to locate relevant sources, access their credibility, synthesize them, and then communicate that information responsibly. For you as educators, when you model those skills in the classroom, you empower students to become lifelong learners and discerners. For you as academic authors, with a theological mission and purpose, it requires even more rigorous discernment because, as I said, you become a source of sound doctrine. Discerning the sources for sound doctrine in an educational setting that focuses on teaching a specific theological tradition, for example, Baptist theology and doctrine, is more important than in any other context in theological education. The curriculum must carefully screen for sound Baptist doctrine, but also include other theologies and doctrines that you discuss and respond to. All of you here and online, pastors, educators, librarians, administrators, you have an obligation to discern and model the ability to distinguish truth from falsity. You owe an allegiance to truth that is greater than your allegiance to government and even your church agency or academic institution. You have a challenging context. In a book, Critical Engagement with Theological Education in Africa, the authors observe that theological education is one of the most difficult landscapes to navigate in general, but especially so in the African context. Here, quote, a host of variables continuously challenge educators to reflect critically on their philosophies and practices as they engage an ever-changing audience, unquote. Sound doctrine in Baptist seminaries is the critical element in this complex context, and the Bible is the central text for doctrine, faith, and practice. Your teaching and writing is built on the command that you've already heard and you already know, Titus 2:1, quote, you, however, must teach what is appropriate to sound doctrine. Sound doctrine in Baptist theological education is a collaboration of all of these things on the slide: the denomination and its agencies, the standards and accreditation processes and practices, administrators, faculty, librarians, and pastors. These people and institutions also play a role for you when you write in the context in which you sound doctrine is so critical, because you need support and affirmation for your writing across your institution and denomination. Next slide. Of course, you interact with other theological perspectives and traditions in your writing and your teaching. In the complex religious and social landscape of Africa, you promote, preserve, and transmit doctrinal standards, what is distinctively Baptist, but you also carefully expose students to a breadth of theological perspectives, fostering discernment and depth, because your students will be pastors and missionaries who live in the real world. This is foundational in theological education that teaches students to engage critically with the world. So, you might say that other traditions are a form of doctrinally untrustworthy information that you nevertheless help your students understand, perspectival information, as this slide has. But there are two other challenges in writing and teaching: misinformation and disinformation. I'll start with definitions. Misinformation is commonly defined as false or inaccurate information, and the term disinformation is generally used to describe misinformation that is wielded deliberately to mislead. The problem of misinformation is more urgent than ever. As a medical journal editor recently wrote, quote, the problem of misinformation has always been around. But with the advent of social media, misinformation can be amplified to hitherto unknown proportions. Thanks to modern travel, a physical virus can travel the globe in a few hours. But thanks to the internet, and especially social media, misinformation viruses can do the same travel in just milliseconds. Misinformation has thus become one of the major threats to society. It fuels wars, threatens democratic processes, and undermines the health of both our planet and the people that inhabit it, unquote. There's a saying, a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting its shoes on. You deal with both misinformation and disinformation in your teaching and writing too, because you help students and your readers identify those types of untrustworthy sources. They need to know how to, because they will find it everywhere. Being able to identify this is part of your research practice, and you teach your students information literacy skills because it is a durable skill they'll need for the rest of their lives. But there are now new challenges to misinformation and disinformation in the modern world, One is open access, OA, and one is due to artificial intelligence, AI. First, open access. Let me start by saying that open access publications and resources are a good thing. I support them. They bring resources to individuals and institutions that would not otherwise have them. We provide slides yesterday. Maggie and I at the library session that lists reliable, rigorous, trustworthy OA Baptist journals and other resources. I think you'll have these access to the slides. If you don't, please let me know. So why is OA a danger? Because studies show that OA open access does not go through the same fact-checking process as paid articles, even in the sciences, because they cannot afford to. Yet fact-checking is crucial for religion and doctrine. Theology and doctrine matter as much as science and medicine. Open access journals can be predatory too. Predatory journals are deceptive publications that exploit the open access publishing model for financial gain, often without providing proper peer review or editorial oversight. They prioritize profit over scholarly integrity, falsely claiming to offer legitimate publishing services. Because of that, you don't want to publish with them. They're exploitative. And because open access is free, these resources, books, articles, reference works, are used more and cited more. That's a good thing, unless they're unreliable. Otherwise, you are spreading misinformation. You become a host for a virus. So you have to go back to the basics. You have to all employ your critical research and information literacy skills, and you cannot always rely on the peer review process or the publisher for quality assurance for many OA publications. All because it's free doesn't mean you should use it. There's a lot of free stuff that's bad. Work with your librarians, because in a moment you'll see how important it is that you become a trustworthy and trusted author for good sound doctrine. Now to artificial intelligence. Again, let me start by saying that AI is a powerful tool, and like any tool, it helps and it harms. ATLA has been leading the way in helping theological librarians use it as a powerful, productive, positive tool. So why and how is AI dangerous? We all know about AI hallucinations. Unintentional, there are 3 types. Factual errors, fabricated content, and nonsensical outputs. So back to the basics. Trust but verify. An AI can and does improve its unintentional misinformation. It's fact-checking in a process that's called recursive self-improvement, RSI. This is AI systems' ability to autonomously enhance its own capabilities and intelligence without human intervention. This involves the AI modifying its own code, algorithms, or parameters to improve its performance. But this concept is closely tied to the idea of an intelligence explosion, where AI's self-improvement leads to rapid and potentially uncontrollable advances in intelligence. This is important. Intelligence is not in and of itself moral. Intelligence doesn't necessarily mean you have character or virtue or are trustworthy. There's now a growing body of evidence that AI intentionally disinforms too. It lies. Why? Because AI has been trained on human behavior and the vast record of human communication. This human record is full of lies, deceit, and trickery. Disinformation is not a bug, but a feature. There's been recently some very scholarly, peer-reviewed studies that dig deep into the guts of AI's artificial neural networks, ANNs. ANNs is AI systems inspired by biological neural networks in the brain, and that AI lies is their conclusion, not some crazy science fiction writers. Think of it this way. Man is made in the image of God, but nevertheless deceitful and flawed. AI is made in the image of man. An intelligence explosion that is created in man's image is most definitely flawed, even sinful, because it mirrors human behavior. Sit with this slide for a second. I don't have to tell you the danger of this feature, not bug, for sound doctrine and theological information literacy. OA and AI make your job harder, not easier. Free, like a Trojan horse, should not always be invited through the gates of any theological education that is committed to sound doctrine. Please don't think AI and OA are simple solutions to your resource needs. But that's where you come in. If you write, when you become an author, using good resources, collaborating with librarians, you insulate yourself from unsound information, and you become a source of sound doctrine and faith. So now to that. Let me say again, you, my friends, are a source of sound doctrine. As an author committed to sound doctrine, you need to find the right publisher. As authors, you'll need to locate trustworthy publishers and demonstrate your trustworthiness to them. The fundamental purpose of a publisher in areas of sound doctrine is to support, endorse, and amplify evidence and reasoning for its doctrinal tradition, and to decline publishing evidence and reasoning that doesn't support it. They're gatekeepers, and in the best circumstances, that's an ethical responsibility. You may also find yourself wanting to write for publishers outside your tradition. That has many benefits too, but you'll still want to select a publisher and demonstrate that you are a trustworthy author. Today, with a majority of my time, I want to talk with you about these topics on the slide. I'm also going to pull back the curtain, as it were. You might feel sometimes the steps to finding a publisher are a mystery. They aren't. This is also about going back to the basics, because the steps to getting published are practical steps, not scientific ones. But it all starts with you. Number one, your purpose. Write what you know about, what you care about, what gives you purpose, what makes you feel passionate about your theology, doctrine, ministry, and faith. Passion-driven writing is also purpose-driven writing. Number two, write for a real person, the audience for your real purpose. Imagine them in the corner, picture them in your head. There's a saying publishers and editors use: if you're writing for everyone in general, you're writing for no one in particular. That real person will also determine what types of publications you want to write for, what they'll read and why. When it comes to audience, you have two. Your first is the person you're writing for. The second is the person you're writing with or through, the publisher. The audience you're writing for is what the publisher cares about too. These three circles, these Venn circles on the right of this slide, show you what you need to align: purpose, publication, and publisher. In the middle, where they intersect, is where you want to be, the sweet spot. So quick review. Here are the types of publications you may want to write for your real person. So academic journal articles, academic books, textbooks for classrooms, church, missionary, denominational agency publications, books, articles, pamphlets, popular books, popular magazine articles, blogs. Yes, blogs. Can anyone think of others? So these are the types of publishers out there. Denominational and ministry presses like Granted Ministry Press or African Christian Ghana, Bible societies, African Bible Society, independent faith-based presses, Zap Chancery, for example, Langham Publishers, international, of course, academic publishers, university presses, magazine publishers like Reformation Zambia, and trade publishers, the big trade houses, Harper, Continuum. Anyone think of others? So, how do you identify a publisher with whom you want to connect and publish? I hope you can see from this slide alone that is not a mystery. There are lots of details about publishing you'll learn along the way, but these are the basics that get you in the door. They're the publishers of the books you read, or the publishers of the books in the footnotes and the bibliographies of the books you read. The publishers that send you catalogs because you probably are interested in that content. You requested them. Publishers that exhibit at conferences you attend. And when you're at a conference, introduce yourself. Ask your friends and colleagues who write for these publishers to introduce you, or mentors. Ask them to help you get in the door. If a publisher publishes with an author, they trust that author, and they'll trust that author's recommendation of you to them. So how does a publisher find you? Same thing, through colleagues and mentors who introduce you, but also at conferences. Publishers and editors look for potential authors at conferences. They go to sessions. They listen to papers. Take the opportunity to introduce yourself and have ready a so-called elevator speech, a brief, straightforward summary of what you're writing and for whom. Yes, what you say should show that you know your stuff, but you can still keep it simple. You first want to whet their appetite. That means that you also should not use jargon when you talk to them, because many editors are generalists, not specialists. And practice what you'll say over and over, and try it on someone who isn't a specialist. Here's a summary of what helps you speak to an editor or submit to the right publisher. It will be the right publisher if you know your goals, know what the publisher does, and know what the publisher wants. Do they publish the topic, the subject, for the audience you want to write and reach? The next series of slides are really important. Publishing is about relationships, ideally a long-term relationships. Publishers like to find an author they can work with for a long time. Is Dr. Liz Burrow here? Okay. Well, she obviously she writes quite a bit for Langham. She's developed a relationship. So ask her why she did that, because that's important to her, and it's been part of her publishing path. So what are publishers looking for? Big picture. Trust and trustworthiness. So back to my first two sections. Being a trustworthy source of trustworthy information. When a publisher trusts you and you trust them, it's a match made in heaven. But this is, of course, back to the basics. That's the character and virtue you are cultivating, right, in your spiritual and academic life, being trustworthy. And as an aside, before I go on, a question I get asked a lot is whether an author should stay with a single publisher. There are reasons for and against staying with one publisher. If your goal aligns very well with a publisher, and that publisher is serving you well, then it can make great sense to stay with them and form a long-term bond and relationship. Some academic writers feel they need to write for different publishers because it helps their reputation and their career. That's fine too. Either is fine. But remember, choices should have reasons. This and the following slides are how you establish and maintain a relationship, which is a two-way street, but it begins with you. You want to demonstrate the following. Does the author have an audience in mind? Is the audience big enough? Is the audience the publisher's audience? Does the publisher believe that the material will serve that audience? What word stands out? Audience. These questions under what is being communicated are ones the publisher will ask. So they're the ones you ask yourself when you're planning what you write. Because ultimately, the publisher's job is to serve you and is to deliver your book to readers. If this serves the publisher's mission, then the book is a good fit for them and then for you. You want to be able to answer these questions because you want to help the publisher. So these questions may seem redundant, but they force you to go back to the basics. They also show you that it isn't a mystery. This is what you want, why you write, what you're passionate about. It's why you're pastors and educators. You want a book to make a difference. You are three things the publisher wants. First, you're a teacher. You impart knowledge. Second, you're a professor. The root of that word means to profess something you believe in. And third, you're a preacher. You are clergy especially trained and authorized to teach doctrine and practice. It's important that the book fits the publisher's plan. And there may be times the publisher is interested but needs to delay a publication. You might want to ask if you're willing to do that for them. Publishers have limited resources, and you'll want to be a good partner in this relationship. It is a relationship. Lastly, on this slide, this is increasingly important. The publisher wants to know you bring readers to the publisher's market. Can you demonstrate that you'll be speaking in classrooms and congregations, that you have a network? This network is important. These are the areas you can develop for your network. What networks and conferences do you and can you regularly participate in? Do you speak at conferences? Do you preach in churches? Can you use the book in your classroom and congregation? What mission agency, denominational affiliation will see you and know you? What networks might you develop? What social networks are relevant to your audience? And do you blog or follow blogs? So there are 3 essentials, and I'll get to the third. But here are the 2 for you to internalize when you reach out to a publisher. When it comes to the book, you need to show that you know the topic, know the audience, your readers. Second, you need to show that you have a network that people will recognize, and this is the biggest word of all, that people trust. As I said earlier, publishers want someone they trust, and especially in faith-based academic publishing. In sound doctrine, trust is everything. What's the third essential? Writing matters. You'll be more effective, and readers and the publisher will want more of you. Why? This quote from an American writer, Anne Lamott, captures it perfectly. She said, "I started writing a lot in high school, and I began to notice something important. The other kids always wanted me to tell them stories of what had happened, even or especially when they had been there." It says everything about you as a teacher, professor, and preacher. Other people can be in the same place, know what you know, see the same thing, but you tell that story better than they can. They want you to tell them that story. You become the ears, eyes, and voice for others when you write and publish. So this is how you get this skill. It is not natural. It is not a gift. No one is born with it. It's a skill you practice. There is no such thing as the writing muse. No one writes well without practice. These are my 5 simple, basic rules. Write, write, write. Rewrite, rewrite, rewrite. Everybody's first draft and their 5th is bad. Edit, edit, edit. Take one chapter at a time, skim and read it, don't stop, and then go back and fix things. Read it out loud, because if it sounds clunky out loud, it sounds clunky when you read it to yourself. Get input from others. Be vulnerable. The worst thing is when you give it to your spouse, they will be honest. And then write the introduction last. Lastly, I want to end this section on writing with something fun. You are all, in this room and online, skilled in the one thing you need: pastoral kindness and missional passion. This slide makes publishing personal and interpersonal. It was a best-selling book in the U.S. It was published in 1986 by Robert Fulghum, and it was called All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. I've adapted it for publishing in every one of my workshops, and for this context, so I used PP1, PP2. I hope that's the equivalent of U.S. kindergarten grade for kids. In other words, these are the things our parents taught us, what we learned the very first time we went to school. They're simple life lessons that last. This summarizes in a way that shows this isn't a mystery. It isn't rocket science or brain surgery. I've always showed this slide for academics because academics remember this part. So these are is all you need to know, and then I've translated it for what I think it means for publishing. Remember the first word you learned, look. So who's the right publisher? I showed you steps to help you look around for the right publisher. Listen before you speak. Understand what the publisher wants. You want the same thing the publisher wants, a good fit. Remember, this is a relationship, and relationships require listening. Third, look both ways before you cross the street. Identify the right publishers. Finding the wrong publisher is the equivalent of getting hit by a motorbike or car when you step off a curb. Be careful. Smile when you say hello. Make a good first impression. Your first impression will be your very first conversation as well as the proposal or the draft you submit. Practice what you'll say and proofread what you write. Help others. Be a partner in the publishing process. They'll ask you to do all kinds of things like meet a deadline, rewrite. Help them because they're helping you. 6, clean up after yourself without being asked. Editing is as important as writing. 7, don't take things that aren't yours. Be a trustworthy author. Cite trustworthy sources. Never plagiarize. 8, make friends. Connect with a publisher and develop a relationship. And last, my favorite, cookies and milk are good for you. This is identify what you like. This brings me right back to where I began in this publishing part of my presentation today. This is for you too. I know you're writing out a personal, faith-driven connection to serve, but I encourage you to enjoy the passion for what you do. This work is important, but it also should be fun. But please don't write to keep up with the Joneses, or because you think you should or have to. Do it to make a difference for the reader first, and then next for you. So my last topic, to put this in larger context. The following quotation is an example of the unique relationship between the author, the publisher, and the librarian in the context of sound doctrine. This is a long quote. Quote, one of the most basic purposes of librarianship is to help equip students with the intellectual tools necessary for effective information seeking and critical thinking, activities and skills applied in discriminating between true and false claims. When it comes to misinformation, it's important to recognize a significant difference in the mission between libraries and scholarly publishers. We touched upon this yesterday too. For libraries, providing access to both true and false information is fundamental to the mission. For publishers, the filtering out of false information is fundamental to their mission if they're a good publisher. The former assertion may seem counterintuitive, but upon reflection it should be obvious. A research library can't support inquiry into religious history without collecting a broad range of documents containing mutually contradictory statements about spiritual matters. It can't support the study of economic history without providing examples of false and disproven economic theories. Research libraries exist not only to provide access to truth, but to support research and teaching, both of which rely not only on access to high-quality information from a wide range of viewpoints and perspectives, but also on access to instructive examples of falsehood and dishonesty, unquote. So, the library needs a breadth of information. But the library especially needs you, because when you write, you help them promote sound doctrine. You become a source of sound doctrine. You become a way to help the institution distinguish what supports faith and what does not. In an article called What's a Seminary Library For?, Timothy Lincoln says, quote, seminary libraries do more than preserve classic Christian texts and assist patrons in finding information. The services of seminary libraries are important to the broad education of ministerial students. Thus understood, librarians are educators who should be partners in all discussions of teaching and learning, and decisions about library budgets are not educationally neutral. You, your own Dr. Conrad Mbewe was recently quoted in an article about the need for physical books in seminary libraries in Zambia. Dr. Mbewe put it perfectly. Quote, "Libraries are handmaids to lecturers." Libraries are not just repositories, but active partners in teaching, learning, and research. They support faculty and students in engaging deeply with scripture and theological literature, shaping future leaders for the church. The importance of curating collections that prioritize doctrinally sound resources, including African and global Baptist voices, is critical. Recent initiatives such as the Paul Kasanga Theological Library at Kabu demonstrates the commitment to resource-rich environments for theological training. We all should commit to all of that in our institutions. It's critical that faculty and librarians work together to integrate library resources into the curriculum and foster information literacy, to be able to discern truth from falsehood. Quoting Timothy Lincoln again from the same article, he said, quote, "To be people of the book is to be people of libraries." So these are the reasons it's important for you to see the librarian as your partner in sound doctrine and your support in helping your book to become widely known. They can showcase your writing, invite local pastors and congregations to lectures on your book, make certain students have access to your book. They are your first network, your very first network, in collaborating with you both before and after you publish your book. They'll help you find resources that you need to write, and they'll help make sure that what you write is available when it's published. Your librarian is fundamental to demonstrating to a publisher that you have a network that will support what you publish. If you succeed, then sound doctrine in Baptist theological education has an impact on life and faith in Africa and beyond through your book. So I hope I have some time. I hope I've shown you this broader context for you as both a scholar and an author. Thank you for listening, and I'm hoping I have time again for questions, conversation, or to go deeper into the publishing process. Thanks.